All right, guys, doing today. We about to hop into a reaction to First Things First, though. I just want to make sure y'all like that video. You know what to do. Hit a little exit full screen, scroll just a little bit, like it back up, full screen it back up. You feel me? All right, so we have a video from Alex Connor, one of the most popular atheists of our generation, I would say, right? And this is titled "Why I'm Convinced That Free Will Doesn't Exist" from Alex O'Connor. Now, I'd say my answer to why free will does exist is, well, not does it. I've never heard an atheist say free will doesn't exist, right? I'm pretty sure everybody knows we have free will, right? I've heard people that don't believe in God say that, if God knows all, then free will can't exist. But in the same space, I never heard atheists claim that free will doesn't exist because, like, we all do what we want based on our own actions. And if I had to guess what his stance would be, it would most likely probably be somewhere along the lines of the universe is going to do what the universe does and we all play a part in that, which means we don't really have free will. We're just acting as a pawn in the universe. So it's not us, it's like an extension of the universe acting through us because we're in the universe or something like that. I don't really know what type of mumbo jumbo we about to get into, but let's check it out.
I don't mean why you sat here in front of me. I mean, why are you here in Durham? The decision you made the decision to come after we invited you, and we're very happy for that. I'm very grateful. But was it preordained that that you were to come here? My question gets at you spoke about free will a lot, and I'm curious as to whether you think it was preordained you are here today.
Yes, why am I at the second best university in the world? No, I will not elaborate. I don't believe in free will. Although, as I keep saying to people as of late, I am agnostic about most things. Not because I don't have a view. Like, I'm pretty convinced that free will doesn't make sense as a concept, but just because I think it's so easy to be catastrophically wrong in so many ways that I'm just constantly aware that, like, this I could have missed something crucial at the basis of this thought, right? Free will, at least the kind of free will that I'm talking about, is like agency of your actions, your ability to control what you do. If you rewound the clock, you could have done something else. You could have worn a different shirt today. You could have not come to this talk, something like that. I don't think that exists. That conversation is tied up intimately with the question of determinism. Is everything preordained? But that's not the same question, I think. Like, there could be a universe that is not predetermined, and yet you don't have control over your actions. You know, like a tree does not have control over the way in which it sways, but even in a non-deterministic universe, it wouldn't have control. The interesting question is, like, to what extent are we the authors of our own actions? And for me, there are lots of ways of looking at this, but a good philosophical entry point to this is to consider the behaviors that you do, any kind of action that you ever perform. You either do it because you want to or because you're forced to. Those are the only two options. Anytime you do anything at all, consciously at least, you do it because you want to or because you're forced to. Now, if you come to this talk, it's because you wanted to come to the talk or because you were forced to by some person or something. Now, you might say, okay, well, I didn't really want to come to this talk, but, I thought that, like, it might be good for this reason or that reason, but I didn't really want to. I went to the gym earlier, but I didn't really want to go to the gym. Okay, but we've got to be comprehensive in our analysis here. You didn't want to go to the gym, but you did want to be healthy. You wanted to stay at home and be lazy, but you also wanted to be healthy. Which of those things did you want more? Well, for a fact, we know that what you wanted more was to go to the gym, because that's what you ended up doing, and had the desires been stronger in the other direction, you would have done the other thing. So when you've got a choice in front of you and you're trying to figure out which one you want more, you don't so much decide which one you want more, as you just find out. I mean, like, presumably most of you right now would prefer, if I gave you the option between having a strawberry milkshake and slapping your mother in the face, you would prefer to have a strawberry milkshake. And crudely speaking, I would ask you to try to want the other one. Try to make the other one more desirable. Not the same thing as choosing to do it. Choose to make it more desirable. You can't just do that. You can't control your desires in that way. It's like, okay, well, I could force myself to go and think about my mother in the worst possible terms and, like, try to compel myself to, and yeah, you could sort of control your wants that way. But you'd have to want to do that in order to do that. And you wouldn't be able to control how much you wanted to do that. In other words, you just push the problem back. So, I think you only ever do anything because you want to or because you're forced to. There's a balance of essentially desires. Conscious action is It presupposes that there is a way you want the world to be that it is currently not. That's why we...
So right now, what I'm gathering is you do everything because you want to or you're forced to. How he's gonna tie this into free will, I don't necessarily know. If he's just gonna say like, well, you know, everything is what you want or what you're forced to do, then it's not like free, but like, because we can't change what we want, so to speak. But every person is different. Every person wants different things, right? The grand majority of people aren't gonna want to slap their mom. There's probably some good people out there, not good people, but there's probably a good amount of people out there who don't like their mom and don't like strawberry milkshakes. So that makes that a very easy choice. However, it's still, every person is different. And because every person is different, every person wants different things. And not everybody's forced to doing a lot of different things either. So it's very hard to say those. It'd be very hard to argue that free will doesn't exist based on those two premises that he's raised. However, I'm very interested to see where this is going.
act. You know, I pick up a glass of water and drink it because I'm thirsty and I would prefer not to be thirsty. Preference governs actions. But also I'm talking right now, so I don't want to pick up the water. Which of those desires is stronger? My desire to keep talking or the desire to drink the water? Well, you already know the answer to that question without having to scan my brain because it's my behaviors. I don't get to choose that. That's completely outside of my control. As Schopenhauer famously put it, as one of our speakers quoted in the debate last night, you can do whatever you will, but you can't will what you will. And that's the crucial thing. So, is the universe determined or not? I don't know. But that to me is completely irrelevant to the question of whether you have control over your actions. Of course, if the universe is not determined, a lot of people think that's because there's some kind of randomness in physics. Either everything is following a set path from the Big Bang, or maybe at the quantum level, there's some kind of randomness going on. I always like to remind people that randomness is by definition something that you are also not in control of. If something is determined, it means that you can't help but do it. If something is random, which is to say indeterminate, that's the definition of not being in control. So either way, you're not in control of your actions because you're not in control of your wants. As I say, I think that's a robust philosophical case, but the universe is full of mysteries. And who knows, there might be some way to make sense of this. I mean, an analogy I often give is that I could very compellingly, I think, argue why consciousness can't exist. Doesn't make any sense. You know, we live in a materialistic universe and there are atoms bumping into each other, biological evolution, and then what? Somewhere along this evolves first-person conscious experience that can, like, immaterially imagine triangles and things. And no way, I could make a very comprehensive argument as to why consciousness doesn't exist, and yet it just does, and we don't know why. And it's a great mystery. And maybe free will's a bit like that, I'm not sure. But philosophically speaking, I don't think it has very good grounding.
I would love to hear probably what the atheists, I'd have to imagine, would say in the comments, or literally anybody, right? This is great grounds for like a discussion. However, I gotta say, that is the most mental hoopla, mental gymnastic, back flipping, hand front split, whatever lever that I've ever seen in terms of like something like this. Bro said, you're not in control of your wants. You know, he had me in the first half, I'm not gonna lie. But like, in terms of, he said you want two things. You want one more. So that's what you want, but I want two things. I'm in control of my wants. If I just randomly say, I want to go to sleep right now. As evidenced by that yawn, right? My body's telling me, I want to sleep. My consciousness is warring with my body saying, you don't want to sleep, you want to make this video. But there's three different things at play right here. There's the want to sleep, the want to make a video, and the want to have a strong willpower, right? I'm controlling my wants in the fact of, I realize I want to go to sleep. I don't have to think about sleep. I made myself think about wanting to go to sleep, right? I didn't have to think about wanting to go to sleep. I could have just focused on this video knowing that sleep was coming anyway, but I chose to want that. Same way I could think of, I want to go on a bike ride right now. I want to be at a nice sunny beach right now, right? I'm in control of the fact that I think of these wants at will, right? And he said you can't control your wills, but I can. I could will myself to pick up my water and take a sip right now. Will myself to keep on talking. In the same way I could will my wants. Yeah, I want to go to bed. I don't have to think about that. Right? The want is probably still going to be there underlying, but in terms of like controlling how I think about it, I can control how I think about it. I can make myself not want to go to bed, by saying, there's this event in this game that I really want to play. Let me not go to bed because the event's last day is today. And I only really have like another hour and a half to stay awake. Or I could pull an all-nighter and diminish my want to sleep for a new want. But also, the want to make a video and the want to be strong-willed is two different wants at once. So there's different quantities of wants and there's different levels of wanting. I don't really understand his argument, I don't think, and I'm pretty sure y'all can tell. But from what it sounds like, it doesn't sound like a good argument. But the point that I said
Definition, something
of
that you
why it's a bunch of random hoopla-dee backflip and mental gymnastics is because he said I could make a good comprehensive argument on why consciousness doesn't exist. But it does. It just does, and we have no explanation for it. My guy, what else would you call that besides God? So many, and I think that's the reason science caught on, was because it was so many of those thoughts. These processes work in X, Y, and way, and it does these things, and it doesn't know this way. So, and we don't know. So let's attribute it to God. Let's praise God for that, right? Because God already made himself evident. Things like gravity, right? Nothing on this world would function without gravity. So when people found that out, it's kind of like, oh, nobody ever thought about gravity before Newton, like that, at least. Nobody, right? It didn't become a worldwide scientific concept of gravity existing and manifesting in the material world like it does, kind of thing. Nobody thought about it in that way, to where sharing ideas based off it and measurements were taken on the speed of whatever the case is. But we look at the why of gravity, and can you think of one? Sure, we can say, so the universe can function right. Well, why does the universe have to function right? Let's actually look it up real quick because I'm not familiar. Maybe there's a why, right? Like, why do we have to eat? Why do we have to do this? Why do we need energy? Like, we have to eat for energy, but why do we need energy? Why can't we just function? Why is there a concept of energy? Why is there anything? Really? That's a good question. All right, peep this, right? Albert Einstein in 1915 figured out what the answer was when he published his theory of general relativity. The reason gravity pulls you towards the ground is because all objects with a mass like our Earth bend and curve with the fabric of the universe called space-time. That curvature is what you feel is gravity, right? The reason gravity pulls you, right? This is not why there's gravity in the sense of like, why does it exist? This is why is there gravity and how does it work, right? Gravity exists because massive objects warp around the fabric of space-time. The curvature is what we perceive as the force of attraction between objects. Newton described it as a force. Einstein's theory of general relativity explains it as a consequence of space-time's geometry. Essentially, mass and energy cause space-time to curve and objects move along these curved paths, resulting in the phenomenon we call gravity. But here's the thing. Why is the geometry shaped like this? Why not a square? And some people may say, well, it couldn't function in any other way. Why did it have to function in the first place? What are the odds of that? Why is everything, right? We always joke about these little kids, especially in early childhood education classes, talking about why this, why that, and they just ask a bunch of why. But the truth is, humans made up their own why. Because God was the first why. Why is it? Because God said so. And God wanted us to live, and God wanted to save us, and God wanted the world to function as it does. But humans said, why? Because the curvature of the hoop-de-whoop, blah, 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 and that's why gravity exists. Not, God wanted to make sure that everything was grounded so nothing could, so everything worked in the way that he wanted to and stayed on the planet so it didn't fly away and the physics could exist. Why does physics exist? So that we could exist. So God could be happy in what he made. But instead, we settle for, I can make an argument on consciousness and why it doesn't exist. But it does. And that's the reason. We're never going to find an answer for that. I can promise you. Right? I can't fully promise you, right? But I can promise you we're never going to find a good answer on consciousness. Because what is consciousness? How do you measure that? Yeah, we have brains. But other things have brains. But they ain't conscious the way we conscious, right? And if they are, we don't know that. Right? Everything in nature seems to work on a path. right? Ants and all that. They do the same thing. They do the same struggle, and every day, day in and day out. Humans do different stuff, but ants, they follow a pattern. Dogs, they follow a pattern. Birds, they follow a pattern. And they do these things routine and routine out, as we see in video games when we make our main characters, and then everybody else is an NPC doing the same thing back and forth. Got the guy walking up the street, hits this corner, he turns around, hits that corner, he turns around. He's still trying to sell you items, but like he's really not doing anything. You know, he's got his set code of what he's supposed to do. Same way animals do, right? You drop an animal in the middle of wherever, they're gonna be okay. They're gonna survive. Drop a human in the middle of whatever, right? They ain't gonna do much. There's animals that abandon their kids and then their kids raise themselves and they know what to do. Humans, you drop a baby in a thing, they ain't gonna know what to do, gang. So I think a lot of this is just some mental gymnastics to not want to accept God, but it really just leads all back because we can't describe everything, and when we try, that's just putting the thing into ourselves and making us think that we're our own entities that are so powerful and so smart, and it's like we're not, because we didn't start figuring this stuff out until like 400 years ago for real. Well, God already been done had it figured out because he done made the jump. Put your faith in him, man. All right, that's gonna be the end of the video. Hope you guys have some fantastic rest of your day. Peace.